Welcome to a Yap session on the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 beta. I've tried to organize my thoughts into categories, so I'm just going to list those and make chapters in the description so you can skip to what you care about. We got UI, map design, score streaks, class creation, sound design, optimization, gameplay, and overall satisfaction. So let's get started. First on the docket is the game's UI. My initial issue with the game is that PC users who want to play the game have to launch COD HQ, which is just Modern Warfare 3 and then sit through the opening cinematic. It's from this that you can launch the Black Ops 6 beta, so basically you just have to launch the game twice, and while that is a small gripe, it presented a larger issue for me. For my PC in particular, COD crashes multiple times whenever it tries to install new shaders, so the initial launch and installations of the shaders for the beta took me nearly an hour. I'd launch the game, it would give me the option to launch the beta, I'd wait for a time, and when it finally opened, it would crash. As soon as the shaders were installed, however, this problem went away, so I'm not going to detract too many points from the game because that's a problem on my end and not really on the game's. As soon as the game loads up, the menu is simplistic and to the point, which I very much appreciated. I personally hated the Hulu-esque UI that MW3 presented, and so a straightforward approach actually filled me with joy. Now, once again, it is only a beta, and as they add more modes, they may change the format. From there, I went into the settings, which were well organized. There are a lot of options you can tweak and change, but provided you have some experience wandering through those menus, it shouldn't take you super long to adjust things to how you want them. Furthermore, I found a setting that let me skip the COD HQ opening cinematic, so you can bet I immediately turned that on. Movement settings were also as simplistic as I realistically think that they could be with the introduction of Omni movement, though I am struggling to figure out how to disable the contextual lean when coming around a corner. To most people, again, not a big gripe. But from a competitive standpoint, we do something called throwing shoulders, which is where you just, sort of kind of peek around a corner. It allows you to see around it, but it only displays part of your body and not your head. But with the contextual lean, the first thing coming around the corner is your head. Another one of the things I enjoyed most about the game's UI was how easy it was to see which of my friends were online and join their game. I felt MW3 was actually a disaster in terms of joining people, and having a nice accessible list directly from the main multiplayer menu was much appreciated. And lastly in this section is the scoreboard during and after matches. In matches for modes like Domination, Hardpoint, and High Value Target, the scoreboard doesn't show kills and deaths as a metric. It shows name, score, objective score, and then one more stat specific to each game mode, like high value target kills, flag captures, or hill time. And to me, that was kind of disappointing. I know there were different ways to measure up to other players, but KD is a staple of COD, and not seeing how your teammates are measuring up to your performance leaves much to be desired. In the last Treyarch title, Cold War, they switched from kills to eliminations and removed deaths from the scoreboard, but in this title, they've taken it even further. In the past, they've at least included the damage done stat, which lets you compare yourself to your teammates, and even that is missing this time around. I will note that you can see teammate and enemy kills and deaths if you hover their name, but there is no good way to see it all at once, the way this currently stands. And from a competitive standpoint, usually some sides are determined by number of kills each team has. There's no quick way to calculate this metric. I think competitive play will suffer because of it. And on the flip side, it will likely stimulate a more friendly environment for casual play, but that's not what I look for in the game. The after-action report does encompass all this information and even weapon accuracy and KD per weapon, but I feel like it doesn't carry the same weight that it would if you were able to compare it to your teammates. A 2.0 KD is far less impressive when everyone else on your team has a 2.6. And finally, the HUD customization is actually a new and useful feature, as it lets you move information to preferred locations and remove some of the clutter. It also allows you to design tweak specific settings, such as map compass, like there would be in Warzone, or shape of the minimap for those like me who prefer the square to the circular one. In the sound design section, I'm hoping to keep this section short and to the point. The launch music is quite nostalgic, and you can tell it was made by the same guy responsible for Black Ops 1 and 2's title themes, though I did find it to be extremely loud. After dropping it to 50% volume, I find myself enjoying it as I wait for the map to load up. Once I did get into the game, I found the guns to be just the right level of realistic without crossing that line into so loud that you can't think. Pair this with a different hit marker sound effect depending on what you did damage to, like a player or equipment or kill streaks, and from an audio perspective, the overall gameplay is quite enjoyable. My one concern about the game was the volume of footsteps, which is always a point of contention in these games. Competitive players want them to be silent, and realistic players want them to be loud and distinguished, and I personally have no clue how to deal with casual players in this aspect anymore. But I do find that the footsteps seem to be tuned to just the right volume, that if you're paying attention, you won't miss them, but if someone is talking your ear off, you'd have no idea little Timmy just climbed up your back end with a boomstick. Lastly, and a rather small detail, I could tell the amount of love that the creators put into the operator voice lines, specifically with the robot operator. I think it's like K6. I don't remember. That's available to the Deluxe Edition owners. That one stuck with me the most because of one voice line. I was playing the game, and he was just like, "I am taking damage. Ow." And it just made me laugh. Don't act like you don't know somebody who says ow in real life when they take virtual damage in a virtual game. And if you're going to pretend you don't, you're watching this video, and I do that, so now you do. Let's move on to the Create a Class. The Create a Class system is another basic feature in the COD franchise that people can't seem to agree on. While I am one of the many who think the pick 10 was literal perfection, I do find that they've implemented sort of kind of happy medium between the two camps who want every aspect to be customizable and those that prefer the simplicity of the past. Everything you need is available on one screen, which is wonderful in comparison to Modern Warfare 3, where you had to hit R2 to do something like change a combat vest. Like, come on, what even is that? The perk system was easy to understand, and while I did find some of the options to be completely useless, there are quite a few good ones out there, such as Ghost, Dexterity, or Flak Jacket, that suit all kinds of styles of play. Additionally, Perk Greed makes its return, along with a bonus perk that you acquire if you equip 3 types of perks from the same class, such as Dexterity, Gung-Ho, and Double Time. Once again, there's quite a few attachments, and they do come with the same stipulation that Modern Warfare 3 had, where some of the attachments are locked behind a level cap on an entirely different weapon. the only decent sights, for example. Like, I couldn't find a sight that I liked. But it's not as bad as last year, where it's overwhelming numbers of attachments. In fact, I distinctly remember counting attachments for the MCW last year, and there were well over 100. The largest complaint I had was for the new unlocks on these weapons. Unless you're paying attention in the after-action report from every match you play, you're going to miss that you've unlocked something. There is no dot, no notification within the gunsmith to note that you've unlocked anything new, and that was quite frustrating. After every match, I found myself having to scroll through every attachment to see if anything had changed, and it's a simple change, but once again, it's a beta, so, maybe it's a feature that they're going to add. Scorestreaks. The beta had 6 available score streaks for players to utilize and enjoy, provided they could actually earn them. The first and lowest score requirement was the Scout Pulse, which simply pings your minimap for a brief time, showing directions that enemies are relative to you. Unlike the UAV, however, it doesn't give their exact location to your teammates. It's far shorter duration and only functions nearby. Personally, I found this streak a bit of a letdown because while it's easy to obtain, the value you get from it is so minimal due to its duration, I think it would be a waste of a score streak slot to even use. The second available streak was the RCXD. Now, you may think it's an explosive car. What else is there to go over? But I'm here to tell you that it's actually the most fun streak in the beta. The developers went and made specific routes accessible to the car that you can actually get it across the map without having to, dodge bullets and grenades and the like. And it was rather enjoyable trying to figure out how to get to new places where the car could go. My only complaint about it came from someone using it against me. The car model is massive, like the size of a player model. And when I think of an RCXD, I'm thinking of the tiny car from Black Ops 2 that's no bigger than the bomb in Search. The streak just becomes less useful the easier it is to hit. And while the routes do help maneuver it about the map, it's pretty easy to lose without getting any use out of due to its absurd size. But on a positive note, a massive explosive car flying at your face is kind of hilarious. The UAV and counter UAV also make their return, and there's not much to say about those besides that they function. The other big benefit I saw was that the UAV and the counter UAV provide score when other players get kills due to the UAV or counter assists, which make it a lot easier to get up towards the higher value streaks. Fifth is one of the big dogs, the Watchdog Helo. This is a chopper that follows you around and peppers your enemies with shots. Overall, the streak was good on maps such as Derelict, but to me, it was a massive letdown on Scud and Rewind, which have a lot of indoor spaces, and it doesn't feel like the streak really shows its presence on those maps. For Skyline, it's like 50-50 on how successful it is. There's a lot of outside space, but there's also a lot of indoor space. Finally, we have the Hellstorm missile. It seems to have like a massive blast radius, which is great because for some reason I had an awful time trying to steer it. Even with the ability to slow and speed up the missile, I struggled to get it to land where I wanted, which in all honesty could just be a skill issue. And the final thing I have to say is that streaks acquired through score rather than kills encourages players to do objectives more, which I think is better for the multiplayer aspect of the game. All right. Let's go over the map design. The beta only has 6 out of the 16 maps that will be available at launch, but so far I'll provide my initial impressions of each of them. To start, I'll go over the 2 strike maps available in the face-off game mode. Pit seems to be an abandoned mine shaft filled with a bunch of close-quarter gunfights. It was the non-stop action in the same sense Shipment was in the previous title. You can get in a gunfight within 5 seconds of spawning up, and I really appreciate the feel of the map for some brainless shooting and just playing for the sake of it. Also, shotguns seem to be really strong on this map, so if you're one to camo grind, it might become your best friend. The 2 main negatives that I noticed is that occasionally you might spawn up to find yourself already being shot, but realistically that happens on the best of maps to the best of players, and I don't think it's the map's fault in particular, but the small design definitely doesn't help the problem. And secondly, the top seemed to turn into a shotgun laying at the top of the ladder on both sides all game in every lobby I played. This detracted a little bit from my experience as it basically removed an entire portion from the map from consideration of going to, because attempting to go up there is just guaranteed deaths. But if it sounds like fun to you, have at it. The second strike map is called Gala, and it was my least favorite of the 2 options. The map is really open with a few select head glitches at the center, far sides, and spawns of the map, which led to a very one-dimensional style of play where one team wins the initial wave of gunfights and traps you in a corner for the rest of the game. The design itself seemed to restrict the viable playstyle to just slow AR, and that's not to say that a skilled SMG couldn't move around the map, just that doing so requires luck and a whole lot of effort. Similar to Pit, there are occasions where you spawn in the middle of someone's iron sights, but it was far more frequent on Gala than in Pit. Now, before you finish forming your opinions, I'd like to reiterate that these are strike maps, which means they're intentionally smaller than the others and are for game mode face-off. As the name implies, you are head-to-head matchup, and that's about it. You're really just getting what you paid for. Next up are the other 4 maps available. Rewind is a map based around a strip mall and an old video store. But while the theme seems inspired, there's really nothing else I can give the map in terms of positive feedback. It somehow manages to feel both way too open and way too cluttered all at the same time. The side lanes of the map are literally just a parking lot. With the center lane of the map, it's just a whole bunch of strung together buildings. Inside the buildings, there's shelves and counters and anything you would expect in a typical store. Just because it fits in the theme doesn't mean it makes for fun gameplay. Additionally, the minimap detail for inside the buildings is just a gray mass. And in fact, on my first initial play of the map, I didn't even think you could go in the building. And couple that with a lack of detail with the color palette that all the character models blend in with, I feel like this map was the worst of the 4 available. Another small complaint is that on domination, whichever side spawns A is just going to win the map. The A and B zones are really close together, while C is nearly 3 times further away. Couple that with the difficulty in flipping spawns in domination, and it's really just a one-sided game, which, you know, makes me like the map even less. Next up is Scud, and it's another of my disliked maps, but that's really just because it doesn't fit my playstyle. Scud is a medium to long range map that snipers and ARs thrive on. There are a few areas that encourage close range gunfights, such as the trench in the middle and the building over by B-Dom, but other than that, it's a lot of distance. Another small gripe is that it's in a desert location, and that leads to a rather grayscale color palette, which is another thing I wasn't really a fan of. It also comes with a bunch of excess particle effects from the sand blowing over the hills and whatnot, but like that marginally obscures visibility, and that's something I struggle with too, but that's due to my bad eyesight and isn't really the map's fault, so I'm kind of neutral on this point. One of the things I really liked about this map is the underground section and the broken building on the side opposite the satellite. The underground portion felt like a good way for a sub-player to maneuver through the map, while the destroyed building actually presented a great opportunity for people who are good at movement to gain an upper hand. Moving on to Skyline, I pretty much liked every aspect of this map. The spawns make sense and are easy to predict. The lower section and collections of rooms present plenty of opportunities for any short-range gun to excel, while the upper corridor and roofs and stairs by the piano provide a similar opportunity for people who prefer a slower and longer range playstyle. Additionally, the spawns by the piano sort of protect you from getting flanked while sitting on said stairs, because there's usually a person coming off spawn that can shoot the person attempting to do the flank in the back. The only thing I don't like about this map are the pool and the security system. To me, the pool seems to be just a random hurdle for players to avoid. It's not deep enough to use for cover. Mantling out of it is a death sentence, so it being there really just makes me avoid that section of the map. Though I have seen that they have changed the hot tub section, which, you know, might improve this map just a little bit. Instead, I'll hit the hallway or the bar section to just, you know, avoid the pool, or that's what I would do before. You know, things could change. The other big grievance I have is the security system. There's no way to tell if it's active or not without approaching the upper room, and walking up the stairs to find a dead end of a platform doesn't really add to the game flow in my personal opinion. There should always be one entrance, one exit. Sometimes that criteria is met and means you can play the game fully immersed. Other times you're completely jarred to find a wall that you can't go through, and you can't wall bang in your way. To me, that takes me out of the game and makes me frustrated to no end. Additionally, they shut the opposite side of the room off with like metal shutters facing the piano side. The purpose of this seemed to make the room defendable and therefore possible to use as a hardpoint, but this could have just been accomplished by just, you know, turning that into a solid wall and getting rid of the security system altogether. I doubt they'll change it at all, but I don't have to like it. Otherwise, the map is great though. And finally, we have Derelict. This map on my first playthrough of, I sort of kind of hated it. I felt lost and confused and struggled to even get in engagements. However, as I played it more and learned you could get on trains, it started growing on me. Now it's my favorite map in the beta, providing long-range lines of sight with plenty of cover for like a crafty sub to work his way up to and some power positions. There's long and short route options that can give plenty of options to work with your team. And the only real complaint I have about the map is that the train spawns next to the building are super sticky and easy to get trapped in, but that can be a benefit if you're looking for high kill gameplay. You know, English is hard. The other thing with the map is that it's really only one lane, so I don't think it'll work for competitive, but it's great for pubs. Now let's discuss what you're really here for, the gameplay. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the new Omni movement, and I'm sort of on the fence for it. Ever since the addition of the slide mechanic, COD has struggled with the cameraing, or ways of moving your character that allow you to see things before your character model is able to be seen by others. The addition of even more complex movements really just results in more possible loopholes for exploitation by the player base, but it is fun. So I'll probably just leave this part to you to figure out if you enjoy it or not, because, you know, you can't please everyone. Trust me, I've tried. Some of the people want realism, some don't. And the thing that I've noticed with the new movement is that the sheer number of button presses I was doing over the course of a single session, after about an hour, my hands were starting to feel sore. But when I equipped the automatic sprint, the problem virtually went away. So there is a solution. Another feature that was added is the contextual lean when you come around corners, and I think that that should possibly be disabled in the settings for the previously listed reasons of trying to avoid poking my head out and getting shot. Since you can't, more skilled players are likely going to resort to other tactics to acquire information that is more annoying for a player to deal with, like snaking or, you know, stun checking. Aside from the new movement, we also acquired a new mechanic that I think will spawn the greatest clips since the glory days of Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3, and that's the meat shield. Now you can grab yourself an enemy, whisper sweet nothings into their ear, and then, you know, drag them to a questionable location. Already I've seen people inquiring when the last time gamers showered, people inquiring how their family life is, whether they've had any water today. Also just dragging them to specific locations to engage in, you know, questionable actions. Overall, I think it's a wonderful addition to the game, and it's quite fun. The only problem I see is, you know, stems from bad people rather than poor game design. Now you might wonder how all of this blends in with the gameplay, and I must say that the new movement in combination with a fast time to kill, also known as TTK, results in a bit of a hectic experience. The speed at which people can move about the map in conjunction with the large amount of small maps means spawns become quite hard to balance. There's been multiple times on both the regular and face-off maps in which I watched the entire team spawn in front of me, and I know that's not very fun for people on the receiving end. Now, fast movement and death also brings up another point that seems like a nitpicky sort of opinion, but I do think that the game would benefit from reducing the amount of time that dead bodies remain on the ground. Because people can lay in new and exciting positions from the Omni movement setting, simply laying on the ground has become a great advantage because it's hard to tell the living players apart from the dead ones. Once again, that's my opinion, and, you know, some players might prefer the tactical advantage that disguising yourself as a dead body might bring, but I'm not one of them. Speaking of tactical, let's talk about bumpers. Due to the time to kill in the game, the ability to regain health rapidly from an item, such as the stem shot, it is extremely powerful, and I think that removing it would be a nice way to slow down the gameplay and make it less chaotic. However, the basis for that is entirely for competitive reasons. Stimming in pubs makes for great clips and adds another level to the thinking aspect of the game when you have to decide if it's worth flying at someone or not, but the high power of these items means you don't really run into a lot of concussions or flashbangs in high elo lobbies because everybody is running stim. I didn't use the frag much during the beta, but the Semtex did seem quite strong and made flak jackets seem like a must-have for almost any class. The thing I don't like about the grenades is the smoke particle effect that comes after the detonation, and that's, you know, previously mentioned bad eyes, blah, blah, blah. Less clutter, more fun I have. But as always, the opposition to my point of view is that the people who want the game to seem more realistic will likely enjoy this. This brings me to the visual aspects of the game. In all the objective-based game modes, there is a marker to denote what the objective is. In Domination, it's the flags to capture, in Hardpoint, it's the hill, and in Kill Confirmed, it's the dog tags. There were several times in which I died because these overlays for these objectives covered a player, and I found that quite frustrating. A resolution is to have this show up on the minimap and not the screen for things like Domination and Hardpoint, and for Kill Confirm, just decrease the size of the dog tags. They don't need to be the size of a character model. The last game mode available was the high value target game mode, which I personally didn't like because it was kind of cheesy to me. Some teams would just, you know, select a building and then sit in it with their high value target, and this kind of reminded me of like old school Carnage Clan challenges for hardcore TDM, where they'd try to win 100-0, lots of teamwork, but, you know, not very fun for the other team. And it's a severe disadvantage for the solo player. As always, though, you must think of the opposing argument, and I think that people who want to play COD like they're actually in the military and are trying to protect a specific individual will love it. It being in the game doesn't harm me in any way, and I don't really have to play it, so if it sounds like your cup of tea, have at it. Finally, let's discuss the actual gunfights. In my personal opinion, there doesn't seem to be a single decent sight for any of the ARs in this game. The iron sights for most is also kind of hard to stomach, and combine that with the advanced movements and player tracking, just becomes a little bit more difficult than in other games. Add in a less aim assist at medium to long range, and you find gunfights to take a bit longer to complete. But to me, this is good news because with everything else speeding up the pace, finding something to slow it back down again is much needed. However, this doesn't hold true for close range gunfights. Controller players will no longer benefit from aim assist inside the 3-meter range. It's supposed to be a balance change for controller versus keyboard and mouse players, but really it just makes hipfire feel really weird. You're used to having a slight slowdown when going over the opponent's player model, and suddenly that's gone. Until I realized what was happening, I found myself spraying wildly in most gunfights. Again, it's a skill thing, but it definitely feels off for the first few hours of play. It also leads to a variation of like timings for these gunfights. Some take forever as neither player can land a hit on anybody, and other times you get insta-zapped. Lastly, a fast-paced game leads to people using guns with more mobility, so don't be surprised if 90% of your lobbies are filled with jackals and C9s absolutely running you down. As a player who predominantly leans towards SMGs, I did find that those two guns felt like playing the game on easy mode, unless I was up against the same gun, which happened a lot more as skill-based matchmaking took hold. The last day of the beta, I attempted to relax and level up the SWAT, and found myself in a never-ending death loop against a bunch of meta-abusing gamers on Babylon, so, while I think this game will be enjoyable, I don't think I personally will be able to sink a large amount of time into the pubs, but that won't matter because, ranked is supposed to be available at the start of Season 1, and I'm a sucker for good competition. I think it's like November 14th that ranked comes out, if I saw correctly. And finally, optimization and satisfaction. While we do have a new game, we don't have a new anti-cheat, and people with better gaming chairs are still running rampant, which leads to a severe drop in enjoyment in the game, not just because, playing against a cheater sucks, but also because it means that there is the possibility that the people you lost to are cheating. And, people will use it as an excuse. Additionally, there's a good deal of packet bursting and stuttering that occurs, but that's been an issue for several years now, and I've just kind of accepted it. The overall optimization of the game seems rather lackluster, as my PC with an Intel 12900K, 24GB overclocked 4090, and 64GB of RAM was struggling to push 180 FPS consistently. Some maps would drop it all the way down to like 120, and others it would be around 210. Additionally, I did have a scan and repair error pop up, which was something that plagued Cold War when it was out, and I'm uncertain if this new Treyarch game is going to have the same issue. It could be a one-off, but I'm wary. The only bugs I ran into was with the Watchdog helo, which, when it's about to be destroyed by the enemy team, it starts doing this like high-pitched beeping noise, something akin to a smoke detector going off, in my opinion. Usually it stops when it breaks, or blows up, or gets destroyed, or whatever, but mine didn't. It continued for 2 minutes until I left the match in frustration. And even with all that in mind, I do think the game feels good. It reminds me of the advanced movement games of old, which seemed foreign at the start, but left me with a bunch of good memories at the end of the game's life cycle, so I'm hopeful it'll happen again with this one too. And additionally, Treyarch brought back a bunch of features that I really enjoyed, like post-match emotes and best play, though I do think best play should be disabled for S&D matches, and then the biggest shortcoming of the game seems to be the maps, which just seem a tad too small. But, the added color to the game makes it much more enjoyable. So, overall, I can't wait for it to drop. That's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing. This isn't my usual kind of content, but I will release a part 2 with my overall thoughts on the actual release version of the game if you're interested in how my feelings changed based on the final product. And if you made it this far, thanks. I appreciate you.